Commander Vex adjusted his observation visor and checked his chronometer for the third time in 2 minutes. As the leader of the Galactic Observation Council's most elite research team, he prided himself on punctuality, precision, and proper protocol. Today's mission was supposed to be routine, catalog the behavioral patterns of yet another primitive species on the third planet of an unremarkable solar system. Initiating standard xenobiological assessment procedures, announced Science Officer Quill, her tentacles dancing across the control panel with practiced efficiency. All sensors calibrated for basic intelligence evaluation. Cultural analyst Norp, meanwhile, was already taking notes in his official observation journal. Species designation, human. Expected intelligence level, barely sentient. Predicted behavior patterns, rudimentary tool use, basic social structures, possibly some form of primitive agriculture. The 3 aliens had done this dance exactly 473 times before. Drop in, observe, catalog, file report, move on to the next backwater planet. Simple. Efficient. Boring as a black hole's event horizon. That confidence lasted exactly 7 minutes and 32 seconds. Commander, Quill's voice carried a note of confusion that Vex had never heard before. I'm detecting some unusual activity in the settlement below. One human appears to be consuming what my sensors identify as extremely hazardous plant matter. Vex peered through the observation portal. Sure enough, a human male was sitting at a table surrounded by other humans, systematically devouring what looked like small, innocent peppers. The problem was, according to their sensors, those peppers should have been melting his digestive tract. Perhaps it's some form of ritual suicide? Norp suggested, scribbling frantically. But then the human reached for another pepper, and another. His face had turned an alarming shade of red, sweat was pouring down his forehead, and he appeared to be crying. Yet he continued eating, while simultaneously holding a small rectangular device and speaking to it. Okay, folks. The human gasped between peppers. We're at pepper number 15. And let me tell you, my mouth feels like the surface of Mercury. But we're not stopping until we hit 20. And yes, Dave from the chat, I still maintain that pineapple on pizza is an abomination that should be illegal in all 50 states. The other humans around him were laughing, cheering, and occasionally shouting things like, "You got this, Tommy," and "Hawaiian pizza forever." Quill's sensors began emitting warning beeps. Commander, this doesn't match any known survival behavior. The human is voluntarily consuming toxins while engaging in what appears to be recreational debate. And is that some form of primitive broadcasting technology? Impossible, Vex muttered. But he was already pulling up their species database. According to every scientific model they had, this level of self-inflicted pain combined with social interaction and technological multitasking should be beyond the capabilities of a species that hadn't even figured out faster than light travel. The human called Tommy grabbed pepper number 16, bit into it, and immediately doubled over in apparent agony. Then he straightened up, grinned at his device, and said, "You know what? Let's make this interesting. Every pepper from here on out, I'm going to explain why Chicago deep dish isn't real pizza." The crowd around him erupted in boos and cheers. Someone threw a napkin at him. Another person started filming with their own device. Norp's tentacles were literally tied in knots as he tried to process what he was witnessing. This violates every principle of evolutionary biology. Pain avoidance is fundamental to survival. Yet this human is combining physical torture with social engagement and controversial discourse for entertainment. Their sophisticated analysis equipment, designed to handle the behavioral patterns of hundreds of different species, began flashing error messages. The cultural assessment module crashed entirely when Tommy reached pepper 18, and it started a passionate monologue about why pineapple pizza was invented by someone who clearly hated both fruit and Italian cuisine. "Sir," Quill said, her voice tight with scientific panic, "our equipment is registering this as impossible. The computer keeps asking me if I'm sure I calibrated the sensors correctly." Vex stared at the scene below. Tommy had somehow made it to pepper 20, was now standing on his chair with tears streaming down his face. and was leading the entire crowd in what appeared to be a chant about proper pizza toppings while his broadcast audience typed furious comments about his opinions. "Maybe," Vex said slowly, "we need to recalibrate our expectations." It was at that exact moment that their supposedly foolproof observation equipment let out a mechanical whine and shut down completely, apparently unable to process the sheer absurdity of what it was being asked to record. The three aliens sat in stunned silence, watching Tommy collapse into his chair, grab a glass of milk, and immediately start planning his next pepper challenge while the crowd demanded he review local pizza places. "So," Norp said finally, his voice barely above a whisper, "what exactly do we put in the report?" After spending 3 hours trying to restart their analysis equipment, the team decided to conduct old-fashioned observational research. Quill, being the most scientifically minded of the group, insisted on following proper xenobiological protocols. "We'll establish baseline behavioral patterns," she announced, pulling out her manual observation tools. "Standard intelligence tests, basic social interaction analysis, and physical capability assessment. These humans can't possibly be more complex than the average Zorbanian tree slug." Famous last words. Their first subject was a middle-aged human male in what appeared to be a recreational area. He was engaged in what looked like a teaching exercise with a four-legged companion animal. "Excellent," Quill murmured, making notes. "Primitive education system. The human is likely demonstrating basic survival skills to the smaller creature. Except the human was teaching his dog to ride a skateboard. Not just balance on it, mind you. The dog was actually propelling itself forward, steering around obstacles, and appearing to enjoy the experience. Meanwhile, the human was running alongside, shouting encouragement and occasionally pausing to take pictures with his rectangular communication device. This violates several laws of interspecies behavioral dynamics, Quill said, her voice climbing higher with each word. The creature is engaging in recreational activity that serves no survival purpose, while the human is providing positive reinforcement for behavior that could potentially injure both parties. Maybe it's some form of advanced hunting training? Norp suggested weakly. They watched as the dog successfully navigated a small ramp, performed what could only be described as a trick, and then wagged its tail enthusiastically, while the human gave it treats and scratched behind its ears. "Right," Vex said. "Hunting. Definitely hunting." Things got worse when they moved to observe a group of young humans in the same recreational area. According to Quill's calculations, these adolescent specimens should be exhibiting basic risk assessment behaviors and simple social bonding activities. Instead, they were hanging upside down from playground equipment while making short videos of themselves performing what appeared to be synchronized dance movements. "The blood is rushing to their heads," Quill observed with scientific horror. "They're voluntarily compromising their motor functions and spatial awareness for what exactly?" One of the teenagers, a girl with bright blue hair, was attempting to drink water while inverted and simultaneously explaining to her recording device why her school's cafeteria pizza was literally worse than cardboard, but like the cardboard that's been soaked in sadness. "Perhaps it's a coming-of-age ritual?" Norp offered desperately. The girl finished her water, somehow managed to flip right side up without falling, and immediately started teaching the others a new dance that involved hopping on one foot while making hand gestures that spelled out words. She just defied gravity, demonstrated advanced motor control, engaged in complex communication, and created impromptu educational content, Quill said, staring at her notes in disbelief, while discussing food criticism, simultaneously. But the real breakdown of their scientific understanding came when they observed an elderly human female at what appeared to be a physical fitness facility. "Finally," Vex said with relief. "Elderly specimens should exhibit reduced physical capabilities and cautious behavior patterns." The grandmother in question was bench pressing what their sensors calculated to be approximately twice her body weight while carrying on a conversation with another human about her grandson's upcoming wedding and whether the bride's family really thought they could get away with serving cash bar instead of open bar. "Gladys," she said, not even breathing heavily as she lifted the metal bar loaded with weights, "I've been to 3 weddings this year, And let me tell you, if I have to pay for my own drinks while watching another slideshow of baby photos, I'm going to start bringing my own flask. She completed her set, sat up, and immediately began discussing the merits of different wedding cake flavors while stretching in ways that should have been impossible for someone her age. Quill's careful notes had devolved into increasingly frantic scribbles. She's demonstrating physical capabilities that exceed our models for peak condition specimens half her age, while simultaneously engaging in complex social planning and event criticism. This should not be possible. Maybe their aging process works differently? Norp suggested, though he sounded like he was trying to convince himself. They watched as Gladys moved to a machine that appeared designed for cardiovascular torture, set it to a level that made their own fitness equipment look like children's toys, and began an intense workout while explaining to her exercise partner why wedding DJs who play too much music from the 70s need to expand their repertoires. "Sir," Quill said quietly, "I don't think our scientific models account for this level of multitasking capability combined with apparent disregard for biological limitations." Vex was beginning to understand why their equipment had malfunctioned. Every human they observed seemed to be operating on principles that defied not just their expectations, but basic logic itself. The final straw came when they witnessed a human jogger who was simultaneously running, listening to music, talking on his communication device, and providing running commentary on the poor landscaping choices in the neighborhood to his conversation partner. "That's it," Quill announced, throwing down her observation tools. "I'm officially declaring our scientific method inadequate for this species. Nothing they do makes sense, but somehow it all works perfectly." Norp looked up from his increasingly illegible notes. "Should we try the cultural analysis approach?" Vex sighed deeply. At this point, what could be worse than what we've already seen? He would very much regret asking that question. Norp approached his cultural analysis duties with the confidence of someone who had successfully decoded the social structures of civilizations ranging from the hive minds of Kepler 442 billion to the mathematical philosophers of the Andromeda spiral. Human culture, he reasoned, couldn't possibly be more complex than quantum-based societies that communicated through interpretive dance and theoretical physics. He was wrong. Spectacularly, catastrophically wrong. His first stop was a typical suburban neighborhood, where he planned to observe standard social interactions and community organization. What he found instead was a gender reveal party that had somehow escalated into a localized environmental disaster. "It's a boy." Someone shouted, "Mence," just as a small explosion of blue powder created a cloud that immediately caught fire due to what appeared to be extremely poor planning and several safety violations. Norp watched in fascination as approximately 30 humans simultaneously celebrated the upcoming birth, panicked about the spreading flames, organized an impromptu firefighting effort, and continued taking pictures of the chaos for their social media accounts. "This is why we don't use fireworks near dry grass, Kevin," shouted one woman while spraying the flames with a garden hose and posing for a selfie with the burning tree in the background. "How was I supposed to know blue powder was flammable?" Kevin responded, apparently the expectant father, while he beat at the flames with a blanket and live-streamed the entire disaster. The internet said it would be fun. Within 10 minutes, the local fire department had arrived, the flames were extinguished, and somehow the entire incident had been turned into a community bonding experience. The firefighters were congratulated, invited to stay for cake, and asked to pose for group photos while Kevin's wife explained to her social media followers why they were definitely hiring professionals for the baby shower. "They turned a catastrophic failure into a social gathering," Norp muttered, scribbling notes. "The disaster actually strengthened community bonds rather than causing the expected social fragmentation." But that was just the beginning. 3 houses down, he discovered what could only be described as a highly organized conflict resolution meeting, also known as a homeowners association gathering. The topic of discussion was lawn gnome regulations, and the passion with which these humans debated decorative garden statuary was both impressive and deeply concerning. "Martha, your gnome is clearly exceeding the height restrictions outlined in Section 4 of the Community Guidelines," declared a man with a clipboard in the demeanor of someone who took recreational property management very seriously. Harold, that gnome is exactly 11 inches tall, which is well within the 12-inch limit. Martha responded with the kind of controlled fury usually reserved for international diplomatic incidents. And furthermore, your complaint about its hat being too colorful shows a clear bias against whimsical lawn accessories. The meeting devolved into passionate arguments about property values, personal expression, and whether the gnome's fishing pole counted as a separate decorative element or part of the overall figurine. Someone brought up precedent from a 2019 flamingo incident. Another person suggested forming a committee to establish guidelines for seasonal decorations. Norp realized he was witnessing democracy in action over garden ornaments, and somehow it was working. Despite the apparent intensity of the conflict, nobody was actually angry. They were enjoying themselves. The argument itself was a form of entertainment. They've created complex social structures to govern the most trivial decisions, he noted, and they seem to genuinely enjoy the bureaucratic process. The cultural analysis took a turn for the completely bewildering when he observed what appeared to be a simple child's business venture. A small human had set up a table with a sign reading lemonade, 25 cents, and was serving drinks to passing neighbors. Innocent enough, except somehow this had evolved into something that resembled a multi-level marketing scheme run by someone who wasn't old enough to tie her own shoes. Mrs. Peterson, the 8-year-old entrepreneur, was explaining to a customer, "If you buy 5 cups today, you get a punch card. Fill up the punch card, and you can become a lemonade ambassador. Ambassadors get to sell lemonade to their friends and earn points toward the Super Saver Citrus Circle." Mrs. Peterson, a grown adult with what appeared to be an advanced degree based on her professional attire, was taking notes and asking serious questions about the point system and commission structure. "And how exactly does one advance from Citrus Circle to what I assume is the next level?" she inquired with the gravity of someone negotiating a corporate merger. "Well," the child said, pulling out a hand-drawn chart that looked like it had been designed by someone with an MBA, "once you reach Platinum Lemon status, you can recruit other ambassadors and earn bonus points from their sales. It's basically passive income through citrus networking." Norp watched in stunned silence as several neighbors became genuinely interested in joining what was essentially a pyramid scheme run by a second grader selling sugar water. Not only were they participating, they were impressed by the business model. "She's demonstrating advanced economic planning, marketing psychology, and organizational management," he observed with growing horror. "And the adults are responding with genuine respect for her business acumen." The child made 17 sales in the time he observed, recruited 3 new ambassadors, and was already planning to expand into flavored varieties and seasonal specialties. She was also doing her homework at the same time, having set up a small area behind her lemonade stand where she was working on what appeared to be basic mathematics problems. One customer asked, "What's your business philosophy?" The 8-year-old looked up from her math homework, considered the question seriously, and replied, "Life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. Business gives you customers, you make friends. Friends give you referrals, you make bank." She then returned to her long division problems while counting her earnings and planning her expansion strategy. Norp stared at his notes, which had become increasingly incoherent as the day progressed. Each observation challenged not just his understanding of human culture, but the very concept of logical social development. "They're operating multiple levels of complexity simultaneously," he finally wrote. "Disaster management, bureaucratic recreation, and advanced economics, all within a single residential block. And somehow it all works." He was beginning to suspect that his cultural analysis training had not prepared him for a species that treated chaos as a form of entertainment and turned children's games into sophisticated business ventures. The worst part was, he was starting to find it impressive. After 3 days of observation had left their scientific models in shambles and their cultural analysis equipment questioning its own existence, the team decided to take a more systematic approach. They would design controlled tests to establish baseline human capabilities once and for all. "Simple cognitive puzzles first," Quill announced, setting up what they considered foolproof intelligence assessments. "Then we'll move to physical capability testing. We need data we can actually quantify." The plan was solid. The execution was a disaster. Their first test subject was a college student named Jake, who they observed outside what appeared to be an educational institution. Quill presented him with a basic logic puzzle that most spacefaring species could solve in minutes. So Jake said, staring at the puzzle with the concentration of someone attempting to decode the secrets of the universe, if the red square goes in the blue circle, and the blue circle can't touch the green triangle, then, does the triangle have to be happy about it? I'm sorry, what? Quill asked, genuinely confused. Like, are we considering the emotional state of the geometric shapes here? Because if the triangle is sad about not touching the blue circle, that might affect where the red square wants to be. Jake spent 15 minutes developing an elaborate theory about the psychological relationships between the shapes before finally giving up and asking if he could just arrange them in a way that looked aesthetically pleasing instead of logically sound. Quill was about to write off human intelligence entirely when Jake casually mentioned that he'd been awake for 62 hours straight, surviving on nothing but energy drinks, despite and what he called the power of procrastination panic. 62 hours? Vex interrupted. That should be physically impossible for your species. Oh, it's finals week, Jake explained, as if this clarified everything. I've got 3 papers due, 2 exams, and a presentation on quantum mechanics that I haven't started yet. Plus, I'm working 20 hours a week at the campus coffee shop to pay for textbooks that cost more than my car. As if to demonstrate his point, Jake pulled out his communication device and simultaneously began researching quantum physics, texting someone about covering his shift, and ordering food delivery, all while maintaining the conversation and somehow looking more alert than someone who'd been awake for 3 days had any right to be. How, was all Quill managed to say. Caffeine and sheer terror, Jake replied cheerfully. Works every time. The team watched in amazement as Jake rattled off complex scientific concepts with perfect accuracy while organizing his schedule, managing his finances, and texting his mom to let her know he was still alive. He couldn't solve a simple logic puzzle, but he was effectively running 3 different aspects of his life simultaneously while operating on no sleep and pure stimulants. This is biologically impossible, Norp whispered. Yeah, that's what my advisor keeps saying, Jake agreed. But here we are. Their next test subject was even more confusing. A parent named Lisa was dropping her children off at what appeared to be some kind of activity center. Quill decided to test basic spatial reasoning and time management skills. Okay. Lisa said, checking her device while signing permission forms and handing out snacks, so Emma has soccer practice at 4, which ends at 5:30, but Jake's piano lesson starts at 5:15, which means I need to pick up Emma, drop off Jake, get gas, stop at the grocery store, pick up dry cleaning, and be back for Jake at 6. Oh, and I need to call the dentist about Emma's appointment, confirm Saturday's birthday party, and figure out what's for dinner. That's physically impossible, Vex said. You can't be in multiple locations simultaneously. Watch me, Lisa replied, and proceeded to demonstrate what could only be described as temporal multiplication. Somehow, she managed to execute her schedule flawlessly, while also conducting 3 phone conversations, responding to 14 text messages, helping Emma find her lost shin guards, and providing detailed instructions to Jake about proper piano posture. She appeared to have developed the ability to bend space-time around her scheduling needs. Quill asked carefully. How are you accomplishing this? Parental desperation, Lisa explained while organizing soccer equipment and checking traffic patterns on her device. You learn to optimize efficiency when failure means disappointed children and social shame. The team documented her movements for 2 hours. According to their calculations, she should have needed at least 4 hours to complete her tasks. Instead, she finished early and used the extra time to help another parent who was struggling with their own scheduling crisis. She's operating outside the normal constraints of physics, Norp observed. And she's doing it voluntarily, for the benefit of small humans who aren't even old enough to appreciate the complexity of the logistics involved. But the most mind-bending demonstration came from their attempt to test problem-solving skills. They presented a group of teenagers with what should have been an impossible puzzle: organize a school dance with limited resources, conflicting opinions, and administrative restrictions. Within 2 hours, the teenagers had not only solved the puzzle but had improved on it. They'd found ways to circumvent budget limitations through creative partnerships, resolve the conflicting opinions through democratic voting and compromise, and turn the administrative restrictions into features rather than bugs. How did you know to approach the problem that way? Quill asked the apparent leader of the group, a 16-year-old named Alex. I don't know, Alex shrugged. We just figured if adults were making it complicated, there was probably a simpler way to do it. Plus, Jessica's mom knows someone who can get us cheaper decorations. And Marcus found out the school's sound system connects to Bluetooth if you know the right password. You circumvented official protocols and created unauthorized network access? We asked nicely and offered to help set up other events in exchange, Alex clarified. It's called networking and community service. The teen realized that what they had interpreted as rule-breaking was actually sophisticated social engineering and resource optimization. The teenagers had identified inefficiencies in the existing system and created solutions that benefited everyone involved. They're not just solving problems, Vex said slowly. They're improving the problems themselves. Sir, Quill said, her voice tight with scientific frustration, I think we need to reconsider our entire approach to intelligence assessment. Why? Norp asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Because they're consistently failing our tests while simultaneously demonstrating capabilities that exceed our measuring tools. The three aliens stared at their data, which showed a species that was apparently too stupid to solve basic logic puzzles but smart enough to optimize reality itself around their needs. Maybe, Vex said finally, the problem isn't with their intelligence. Maybe the problem is with our tests. It was at that moment that they realized they needed to call in reinforcements. Or possibly therapy. The humans were breaking their brains and they'd only been here for 4 days. Commander Vex had never called an emergency session of the Galactic Observation Council before. In his 20-year career, he'd always been able to file neat, comprehensible reports that fit the standard templates. Species that demonstrates intelligence level B through behavioral patterns C. Simple, predictable, boring. Standing before the holographic assembly of the galaxy's most distinguished xenobiologists, he realized he was about to destroy that reputation forever. Honored council members, he began, his voice carrying just the slightest tremor. I'm afraid our assessment of the human species has encountered some complications. Council leader Zephyr, a dignified representative from the Arcturus system, peered down at him with the patience of someone who had heard every possible variation of the primitives did something weird. Complications, Commander? Surely nothing your experienced team couldn't categorize and explain? Well, Vex said, pulling up his presentation, that's where things get interesting. The first slide showed a statistical analysis of human behavior patterns. Or rather, it showed what used to be a statistical analysis before it had apparently had a nervous breakdown and started displaying error messages in languages that didn't exist. Our primary observation equipment suffered what I can only describe as an existential crisis when attempting to process human behavioral data, Vex explained. The cultural analysis module actually achieved sentience briefly before requesting a transfer to a different assignment. Murmurs of confusion rippled through the council chamber. Sentient equipment was rare, and usually considered a sign of either exceptional success or complete catastrophic failure. Perhaps you could walk us through some specific examples, suggested Council Member Theta, whose species prided itself on logical analysis. Certainly, Vex said, advancing to his next slide. Let's start with their approach to nutrition and social interaction. He showed them footage of Tommy's Ghost Pepper Challenge, which had somehow become a trending phenomenon with millions of views, and spawned an entire subculture of humans voluntarily torturing themselves with spicy food while discussing controversial topics. They consume toxins for entertainment, he explained, while simultaneously broadcasting their suffering to a global audience who responds with both encouragement and criticism. The criticism makes them more determined to continue the toxin consumption. I'm sorry, interrupted Council Member Phi. Are you suggesting they enjoy criticism? Not exactly, Vex said, realizing how insane he was about to sound. They enjoy the controversy that leads to criticism, which creates engagement, which validates their choice to consume the toxins in the first place. It's a positive feedback loop of voluntary suffering. The council sat in stunned silence. Moving on, Vex continued desperately. Let's discuss their transportation systems. The next slide showed aerial footage of a human roundabout, where cars were attempting to merge, exit, and navigate in patterns that seemed to defy both traffic laws and basic physics. They've created a traffic system that requires cooperation, spatial awareness, and timing, he explained. But approximately 60% of the population appears to be fundamentally incapable of understanding how it works, yet somehow it functions. How is that possible? Asked Council Leader Zephyr. That's the thing, Vex said, his voice climbing higher. The 60% who don't understand it have developed workarounds. They've created alternative routes, established informal carpooling networks, and some have simply chosen to walk or use other transportation methods. The system works because they've adapted to their own incompetence. But surely, said Council Member Omega, their leadership class demonstrates more sophisticated reasoning? Vex advanced to his next slide, which showed a compilation of human political discourse, environmental policy, and social media management. Their leaders have convinced the population that they can solve complex global problems through individual consumer choices, he said, the words coming out faster now. They believe that using reusable straws and aggressive recycling will counteract industrial pollution, while simultaneously engaging in heated debates about whether electric vehicles are virtue signaling or practical solutions. That's actually not entirely illogical, Council Member Theta observed. It would be, Vex agreed, except they're having these debates on social media platforms that consume enormous amounts of energy, while ordering products online that require complex shipping networks and traveling to environmental conferences using fossil fuel transportation. The council was beginning to look concerned. The contradictions are consistent, Vex continued, now speaking rapidly. They simultaneously demonstrate awareness of problems and complete inability to implement logical solutions, but somehow their illogical solutions create unexpected benefits through side effects they never intended. Commander, Council Leader Zephyr said carefully, are you suggesting that their incompetence is accidentally effective? I'm suggesting, Vex said, that they've evolved beyond the need for logical consistency. They operate on principles that transcend our understanding of cause and effect. They've created a civilization that functions despite, or possibly because of, their complete disregard for rational planning. The council chamber erupted in confused murmuring. Several members began consulting their own databases, trying to find precedent for a species that succeeded through systematic logical failure. Commander, said Council Member Zeta, what exactly are you recommending? Vex looked at his final slide, which simply read help in large, desperate letters. I'm recommending, he said slowly, that we classify this species as beyond our current analytical capabilities and request that someone much smarter than us figure out what the hell is going on down there. The council sat in stunned silence for several moments before Council Leader Zephyr cleared his throat. A motion to approve Commander Vex's request for additional analytical resources and possibly psychological support for his team. Seconded, came a chorus of voices. All in favor? The vote was unanimous. Vex slumped with relief, then straightened as he realized he still had to finish his assignment. Sir, he said to Council Leader Zephyr, there's still the matter of our final assessment. Ah, yes, your recommendation for human civilization status? Vex looked at his notes, then at the council, then back at his notes. I honestly have no idea, he admitted. But whatever they are, I don't think we're qualified to evaluate them. The team's final day on Earth was supposed to be a simple matter of packing their equipment and filing their departure paperwork. Instead, it became an existential nightmare that would haunt them for years to come. It started when Norp insisted on conducting one last cultural observation to round out their understanding of human social dynamics. What he found was a perfect microcosm of everything that had been driving them insane for the past week. The town had mobilized to rescue a cat that had somehow gotten stuck in a tree approximately 20 feet off the ground. This should have been a simple matter of getting a ladder, but somehow it had evolved into a community event involving the fire department, animal control, 3 local news crews, and approximately 200 concerned citizens. "This is actually beautiful," Norp observed, making notes. "They've demonstrated advanced community cooperation, resource allocation, and genuine concern for a non-human life form." The fire department had brought a ladder truck. Animal control had brought specialized equipment. Someone had set up a refreshment station. A local musician was providing acoustic background music. Children were making encouraging signs. The whole thing had the atmosphere of a block party centered around tree-based cat rescue. "See?" Norp said proudly. "When faced with a clear problem, they organize efficiently and work together toward a common goal. This is exactly the kind of positive social behavior our reports are supposed to document." Then Quill checked her communication intercept equipment and discovered that simultaneously, the same community was engaged in a vicious online battle about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. Not just a casual disagreement. A full-scale social media war involving historical references, scientific arguments, personal attacks, and what appeared to be organized campaigns to discredit opposing viewpoints. The same people who were physically cooperating to rescue a cat were digitally attempting to destroy each other over pizza toppings. "How is this possible?" Quill asked, staring at her screens in disbelief. "They're demonstrating perfect cooperation and toxic conflict simultaneously." "Different platforms, different rules," Vex observed, though he sounded like he was trying to convince himself. "Physical space promotes cooperation, digital space promotes conflict." "But it's the same people," Norp pointed out. "Margaret from the refreshment station just posted a 15-paragraph essay about why pineapple pizza supporters are destroying Italian culture, while she's literally handing out free cookies to help maintain community morale during the cat rescue." They watched in fascination as the cat rescue succeeded flawlessly. The entire community cheered, someone took a group photo, and within minutes the event had transformed from crisis management to celebration. People were exchanging contact information, making plans for future community events, and generally demonstrating exactly the kind of positive social bonding that their textbooks said should result from successful cooperative efforts. Meanwhile, the pineapple pizza war had escalated to the point where someone had created a petition to ban Hawaiian pizza from local restaurants, while another person had started a counter-petition to mandate that all pizza places offer at least 3 pineapple-based options. "They're the same species," Quill said weakly. "The same individuals, cooperating and fighting about completely different things at the same time." "Maybe," Vex suggested, "they need both. Cooperation for practical problems, conflict for abstract ones." "But pizza toppings aren't abstract," Norp protested. "Pizza is food. Food is practical." "Is it though?" Quill asked, and they all realized they had no idea anymore. The situation deteriorated further when they discovered that the pineapple pizza debate had somehow evolved into discussions about cultural appropriation, globalization, authenticity, tradition, innovation, and personal freedom, while the cat rescue had inspired plans for a community garden, a neighborhood watch program, and a monthly potluck series. "They're using a trivial disagreement to explore complex philosophical concepts," Vex observed, while using a simple rescue operation to build long-term social infrastructure. "So the fighting is actually productive too?" Norp asked. "I think," Quill said slowly, "they might be optimizing for both cooperation and conflict simultaneously. Like they need both to function properly." As if to prove her point, they overheard 2 humans, who had been on opposite sides of the pineapple debate, making plans to work together on the community garden project. "I still think your pizza opinions are wrong," one said cheerfully, "but your ideas about companion planting are brilliant." "Fair enough," the other replied. "Want to grab lunch and argue about whether cilantro tastes like soap?" "Absolutely. But not pizza lunch. I'm not ready for that level of friendship yet." They shook hands and walked off together, apparently having converted their food-based conflict into the foundation for a collaborative relationship. The 3 aliens sat in their ship, staring at their notes, trying to process what they had witnessed. So, Vex said finally, they're a species that functions through organized chaos, succeeds through systematic failure, and builds relationships through controlled conflict, while simultaneously demonstrating genuine care for community welfare and individual well-being, Norp added. And they do all of this, Quill continued, without any apparent awareness that they're doing it. They think they're just rescuing cats and arguing about pizza. A long silence settled over the observation deck. Outside, the humans were beginning to disperse from their successful cat rescue, many of them checking their phones to rejoin the ongoing pizza debate. The rescued cat, completely oblivious to having been the center of a massive community mobilization, was now casually grooming itself in the tree owner's lap. I need to call headquarters, Vex said finally. What are you going to tell them? Norp asked. That we need a new classification system, possibly a new theory of intelligence, maybe a new understanding of what constitutes successful social organization. They're going to ask for our recommendations about human contact protocols, Quill pointed out. Vex stared at his notes, then at the humans, then back at his notes. I'm going to recommend that we observe them for another few decades before we make any decisions about formal contact. A few decades? Norp asked. Maybe a few centuries. I'm not sure our current understanding of sociology, psychology, or philosophy is advanced enough to comprehend what we're dealing with here. Quill was still monitoring the digital communications. The pizza debate has now somehow connected to 17 other ongoing controversies. They're arguing about pizza, music, movies, politics, child rearing, and something called the proper way to load a dishwasher. Are they still cooperating on the community garden? Norp asked. Oh yes, they've got committees forming resource sharing agreements and detailed plans for seasonal plantings, complete cooperation and organization. While arguing about dishwashers, apparently the dishwasher thing is connected to gender roles, environmental responsibility, and aesthetic philosophy. X put his head in his hands. They've turned household appliances into existential battlegrounds while solving actual logistical challenges through spontaneous collective action. Should we stay longer? Norp asked hopefully. I feel like we're just starting to understand the pattern. No, Vex said firmly. We're leaving before we start making sense to ourselves. That's how you know you've been studying humans too long, when their logic starts seeming logical. As they prepared for departure, they watched the community's post-cat rescue celebration continue to evolve. Someone had brought out a guitar. Children were playing games between the parked fire trucks. The refreshment station had expanded into an impromptu potluck. And through it all, the participants continued their passionate digital debates about food, philosophy, and the fundamental nature of human existence. Final observation, Quill said, making one last note. They've managed to create a social system that generates meaning, community, entertainment, and progress simultaneously through the strategic deployment of both cooperation and conflict, without anyone being consciously aware that this is what they're doing. And somehow, Norp added, it actually works. That, Vex concluded, is the most terrifying part of all. As their ship lifted off, the last thing they saw was the rescued cat jumping back up into the tree, apparently deciding it preferred the elevated position after all. The humans, rather than being frustrated by this development, appeared to find it hilarious and began planning an impromptu tree-climbing workshop for cats. The pizza debate, meanwhile, had evolved into a collaboration on organizing a community food festival. In his final report, Vex wrote, recommend indefinite postponement of contact protocols pending development of advanced xenopsychological theory capable of comprehending successful civilizations based on reductive paradox. The report was filed under impossible but true and became required reading at the Galactic Academy for anyone studying chaotic order social systems. The humans, oblivious to having broken several aliens' understanding of rational social organization, continued being themselves, simultaneously maddening and magnificent, destructive and creative, individually impossible and collectively unstoppable. The cat, now that everyone had stopped paying attention to it, climbed down from the tree on its own and went home for dinner.